One of the reasons the Pole of Cold ended up being solo was who do you take with you? I was planning to drive in the peak of winters to Onyapon on a road that is so little known about. The vehicle, if it turns off, it's that's it. You're dead. You won't survive more than 30 minutes of that environment outside. I was driving in temperatures of minus 60. 60 is the lowest I saw. It was extremely difficult. Again, that's when you realize the metal you're made of.
Hello, people out there, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Seek Your Purpose podcast. I'm your host for the show, Mayank Sehra. But before we proceed ahead, if you haven't done so, then please hit that subscribe or follow button on your podcast listening platform so that you never ever miss an episode the time we upload it. Today, in this episode, I'm glad to indulge in conversation with an adventure overlander, an extreme terrain driver, and an off-road jeeper. Nidhi Salgame. Nidhi ma'am always wanted to make a career out of her love for outdoors only. So at the age of 7, she was a kid adventurer. By the time she turned 15, she was an adventure trip leader in the Western Ghats. She became an off-road jeeper and then an extreme terrain driver by the age of 30. She became the first ever Indian woman to drive all the way from Delhi to London, covering a distance of 23,800 kilometers across 17 countries in 97 days. And she achieved this feat while being the mother of 2. After that, to challenge her with what's next valley feeling, she drove solo all the way from Delhi to the Pole of Cold in Siberia to unravel something that is known as the Cold of Bones. That's one of the deadliest roads to travel in the world, surrounded by thickest cover of snow. She became the first Indian ever to do so. Now, keeping alive her spirit of, punching a fear straight onto its face, she started Wander Beyond Boundaries along with her husband, Colonel Malik. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Today, I have been joined by an amazing personality who is the perfect example of this quote that winners never quit and quitters never win. I still remember, ma'am, it was way back in 2016 when, while scrolling through my Facebook, I came across an article which read Delhi to London, 3 women live up to their dreams. And I was so excited after reading that I straight away went to my mom, read it aloud again, and immediately noted down on my bucket list. So here I'm sitting with the woman Nidhi Salgame, the sole driver of that trip. Ma'am, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayank.
So, ma'am, how's 2021 treating you?
The first 3 months were very busy. There was a bit of a let up in the COVID situation, so we managed 2 expeditions around then. But it's now back to standstill and square one, and one is just chilling at home.
Right, ma'am. And ma'am, I was just going across your videos and I came to know that I guess it was way back in February this year that you completed an expedition to the northern Kashmir, right?
Correct, correct.
Kashmir, I mean, it's like the Switzerland of India. So it's like the same way it's being showing in the movies. Is it safe? Is it affordable? Is it what? So I just need to know in your terms.
North Kashmir is not some place that everybody goes to. And like I keep saying again and again, for some reason, when it comes to Kashmir, we limit ourselves to the usual suspects, which is, Gulmarg and Srinagar, Pahalgam, and Sonmarg. But Kashmir is much, much more than that. It's beautiful, it's safe, much against what people think it is. Yes, permissions are dodgy. You got to be a little perseverant. But if you're really that discerning traveler who wants to explore remote areas, nothing better than North Kashmir.
Right, ma'am. And I just want to let you know that a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, she planned a solo trip somewhere around in March, the first week of March, and she was all in all inspired from you. And she went
Thank
on a
you.
solo trip for a week ahead, and when she came back, she was all way different from the one that जो पहले गई थी उससे बिल्कुल अलग होकर आई है वो.
How beautiful. That's what travel does.
So, ma'am, let's begin by touching a bit on your childhood just to get an idea, the making of a traveler. So, the making of the adventure seeker that you have in you. So, a bit about your childhood, your schooling, your college, and all.
I've had a very unconventional life, Mayank. If you've read up. I mean, I started trekking and going outdoors at the age of 7. My mother was working, and I think back then in the late 80s, it was about, making your daughter independent and therefore sending her out. And I just took to it, and it became addictive. And by the age of 14, I was leading treks. And it got to a point where, it wasn't very welcome in the house, the whole idea of going outdoors, because it had become so much. But I guess it made me a different person, and it gave me a sense of purpose, and it gave me a lot of time to engage with myself. I think the bit about the reflective traveler started way back then. It was never about how many times you went to a place as much as what the climb was like each time, and how you processed it during that time. So, my teenage years were spent in the Western Ghats. I was leading trips. I lived on a campsite. When it got really confrontational, I had to step out of home, and I managed to work for an organization very young and live the life that I dreamt of. It wasn't easy, but yeah, that's what's made me who I am today. So I never went to college, to answer your question directly. Yeah.
So it was like straight away from school and then pursuing your dreams of adventure seeker.
Absolutely. And it came at a cost, of course. It's not like I was bad with my academics. I did brilliantly well in my 10th. And back then in the 90s was not easy. It's not like today. And financially, I had to sustain. So I started writing articles. I think when you really want to do something so badly, you find ways of doing it.
Right, ma'am. Perfectly said. So what about your parents? Were they really supportive right from the starting, or
Like I said, like I said, initially they were very supportive. There's no denying that. As I moved into middle school and high school, that support waned off because I think they were scared like any other parent would be. Yeah, and I think it's come a full circle now. They're very proud of where I've gotten in life. But support per se has been quite patchy.
for a person who started, like, it was always from you, like you always wanted to be an adventure seeker, it was always from your childhood, or what was the series of events that actually led you to being, okay, I want to pursue a career ahead in this life, no matter what, I'll go and build my career in this particular field of adventure only.
I think for me, it was never about the adrenaline per se, like you would associate adventure with. For me, it was discovering portions of myself which I didn't think existed. And that used to happen on treks. As simple as sleeping on a rock all night in the cold, and to just realize while, initially it's also beautiful, by early morning, the rock also becomes cold. Seeing so many days and nights like that outdoors, I think it just showed me how much more I was able to weather, and I was learning from each experience, and I think I found that learning extremely valuable. I said that's the way I want to learn in life. Textbooks and theory and all of that wasn't really making sense, and I somehow was never able to connect with formal education. So learning by experience is what kind of triggered it off for me, and yeah, that started the journey.
So learning by experience is what you are saying that teaches you the most.
Absolutely.
So when it's about solo traveling, I guess you started planning this Delhi to London way back. I think you were around about 30, 35, I guess, when you started planning for that trip.
I was a mother of two. I had, in the last, let's say, between 25 and 35, dedicated so much of myself to motherhood, to earning and sustaining a house and all of that. And I caught myself talking about myself in past tense at some point. And I said, I used to do this and that. And I said, I'm the same person, and how unfortunate that I've gotten to a point in life where it has to become past tense. And I said, if I am the same person, then let's just attempt and rediscover that strength. And Delhi London was a breakthrough in that sense.
So it was like the voice that was inside you kept on telling you, you know what, Nidhi, just go and get it done. Just go and what are you doing? Just go and just be back on track. Just hail yourself again to the earlier version of Nidhi and just go and seek it. Was it like
Absolutely,
that?
absolutely, absolutely. It was. a big part of me that was hugely unfulfilled. And more I thought about it. I said, if I'm raising children as an unfulfilled mother or a human being, they're just going to start believing being unfulfilled is part of the norm. And I think it's important that women, particularly at that age, are, or any individual for that matter, is happy and a satisfied soul at the end of the day. That's how you spread that ethos amongst people around.
Right, ma'am. And ma'am, because I'm very much interested in knowing about that trip, because in 2015 and 16 I came across that trip, and I just had a break from my undergraduate. So while I was going to pursue my postgraduate, I was having a break, and then coming across such a trip, being started and being carried away by three women out and out alone. And the important part was that there was only one solo driver in that, who used to travel for around like 23,800 kilometers all the way through that. So how was the planning part being involved when you are involved in planning such an extensive trip? So what was the planning strategy was like for you?
It was madness. It took more out of me than I could imagine. It was 8 months of maybe on an average sleeping 2 to 3 hours a day. And I started with nothing. I mean, I didn't have a vehicle, I didn't have the money, I didn't know how to go about it because nobody had done it. And there were two people who were British citizens, British Indian citizens, who had driven from London to Delhi back then, but nobody on the other way around. And with an Indian passport, to get through so many countries and the paperwork and the legality involved, that took the life out of me. And but for support, and it meant starting from sourcing the money to getting a vehicle to seeing that permits and processes, I mean the paperwork was in order. And then came the visas, because back then no visa agent would even make visas for entry and exit. Today things have changed quite a bit, but I must have contacted three or four big visa agents in the country, and they all said no. So it meant me physically going and submitting applications in every embassy and picking up the passport. So it was a lot of running around per se.
So when it's about reaching sponsors, so when you explain your ideas to them, this is what I am planning and this is what we'll be getting out of it. And yes, I'm very much sure that you might have failed rejection from a lot of people who were just not ready to agree with your idea. It must be like, what is she saying? It can't happen. You can't do it. Especially a woman can't do it. But what kept you going throughout all these naysayers and all?
I think when you plan first of its kind expeditions, the risk of failure is real. And no brand wants to be associated with that failure. That's where it kind of makes or breaks. It's about, even for a sponsor to take that leap of faith and say, let's see what happens. So if you, I mean, look at it from how the vehicle panned out. I must have approached every single auto player, but nobody was willing to lend a vehicle. It's not like I wanted it throughout. And finally, the ones who came on board were Mahindra First Choice, who buy and sell used cars.
Hmm.
So they gave me a car that had run 68,000 kilometers, and that didn't make much of a difference for me per se, but their stakes were considerably low. So the risk of failure is what deterred pretty much everyone. And in the end, believe it or not, it was the government who stepped in with a grant, without which it wouldn't have happened.
Okay. I guess you planned it initially as a solo one, right? Then you
Yes.
came board with two of your friends.
Thing is, I always wanted to do it solo, but like I said, the risk of failure. So, what if she just falls into a gorge and vanishes? So, the only condition put by my vehicle sponsor was that you need to have 2, 3 more people with you. That is how it became a team of three, and they were two cousins of mine who I knew all my life. And even during the journey, we had a brilliant time. They kind of flew in and flew out at different points as well. Yeah, so that's how it became a team per se.
And what was the reaction of your family back then that three women are going out on that trip for around like 90, 95, or 100 days?
My family was hugely supportive, which was a huge blessing. My kids were extremely excited. I think the novelty kind of blew everyone away. the fact that something like this was doable. So initially, there's skepticism that then converts to excitement, and then it's anxiety when you're actually on the road. And when you succeed, nothing succeeds like success.
Yes, ma'am. Nothing succeeds like a success. So how was the feeling of reaching to the different borders, like from India to another country, then to another, then to another? There's change in atmosphere, change in temperature, change in natives, change in the way people perceive, and a different nationality car being roaming around them. So when you interacted with people, how was their reaction back then?
They were curious. I think overwhelmingly one was received with a lot of kindness and love. I mean, there was no denying that. A lot of curiosity, yes. A lot of curious look, curious onlookers, curious questions. People were really like, for example, at the border checkpoints, I was driving a Mahindra. So the customs document your car name says, so they have to write down the name of the car manufacturer, and they had never heard of this. It was, which country is this? And I said, India, it's an Indian car. And they said, are you sure it's going to go that far? I said, of course.
I feel that you must have definitely your fair share of, not things going particularly as per you have planned. Because it's being three women, not just women actually, the road is being unseen, unknown. It's for the first time that people were going out there. So what were your fair share of fear, or, the tough situation that you have faced over this? And you can guide us with one or two situations.
Lots of them, Mayank. Lots of them. Been a few years now. I mean, a lot of issues with. I remember there was an exit from Kyrgyzstan to Uzbekistan that got really close. There was a lot of road regulation that one wasn't used to. So a lot of discussion and run-in with the cops in different countries and not knowing the language and relying on Google Translate at the end of the day. Yeah, so those were some tricky situations, but I think right at the start, being stuck in Moray, so that year had a bad cyclone. Just dealing with paperwork, the visas expiring. I think that part really took over, and that was the stress more than anything else.
Ma'am, I really want to know the real hard feelings that you might have had, once you reached London, and the feeling of satisfaction and the feeling of getting done with what I have planned in my mind. So what was the feeling? Was it like it's being done, okay, now I'm on the top of the world, or is it like what's next for me ahead in life after that?
When I finally reached London, very unlike how I thought I would react, I just went quiet. I think the weight, the magnitude, the effort, the struggle, it just started sinking in at that point. And I just wouldn't talk. There was so much media, there was all of that, but I just wouldn't talk. And it took me a good 2 to 3 weeks to process what had happened. It was deeply personal, the end point. It had nothing to do with the world. It wasn't about showing the who's who, it wasn't about the feat. I think I had managed to connect with a portion of me that was lost somewhere. So I think that was very overwhelming.
So it's being a quite personal touch over here. So did you really cried, or had the tears in your eyes when it was being completed or being done?
I didn't even have emotion left for that. I was so fatigued. I was just quiet and I was numb, I think, for the first 24, 48 hours. After 42 second, third day in London is when I went and dropped the vehicle off at a port to, ship the vehicle back. So I dropped off the vehicle and I took a train for the first time in so many months. And I was heading back to London to the hotel. And I remember thinking, what now? It's like the purpose is gone. Like I don't have to plan what's happening tomorrow. There was a sudden hollow, that just appeared. And I said, shouldn't I be like jumping? Shouldn't I be like really happy and overjoyed at this point? But that wasn't the case. It was sinking, and it was one had managed to do something that you never imagined that you had the ability to do. So just that realization was extremely humbling.
So a personal change in you that you felt when you came back.
It showed me that the world was your canvas. You don't have to kind of limit it. It showed me that yes, I was capable. And if I set my mind to it, I will be able to achieve more. And it also kind of put that kida permanently to, see what next in terms of what else can I endure. If I've done this, then what now?
So coming straight away to the next point that you've just mentioned, what's next wala point? I guess the next trip that you planned was the most challenging and the most difficult experience for you. The Siberia one, right?
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, Siberia was, in hindsight, it was a death wish.
And I was just going through your testimonials that you have shared over the internet, and it said, it's the road of bones and the I can't even
Pole of
recall it. What
cold.
exactly was it? Yeah, the pole
Oimikon.
of coal.
Yeah.
So, what exactly it is? Can you please let our viewers get an idea what exactly it was?
So the pole of cold is the coldest inhabited place on Earth that experiences temperatures. The lowest it's seen is about minus 71 degrees centigrade. It's on a permafrost bed, so that area has the last remnants of the ice age, while the earth is frozen. It's called permafrost, that's frozen earth. So there's an active and passive layer which freezes, defreezes. The top layer freezes, defreezes by season, and the bottom layer, that's the passive layer, is just stone, means stone earth, like ice earth till the core of the earth melts it. So that's how cold this region is. Very few had attempted. I recall reading a British woman who had attempted it in the winters to drive to the pole of cold. And I read about her, and of course, she had, I think, three, four more people with her. These kind of adventures and explorations, they have a very personal tone to them. These are not expeditions that get mounted for the media,
Hmm.
for making a statement, because you are setting yourself up against the odds in perhaps the most impossible of situation. You're very aware. One of the reasons the pole of cold ended up being solo was, who do you take with you? I was planning to drive in the peak of winters to Oymyakon on a road that is so little known about. The vehicle, if it turns off, it's that's it. You're dead. You won't survive more than 30 minutes of that environment outside. I was driving in temperatures of minus 60. 60 is the lowest I saw. It was extremely difficult. Again, that's when you realize the metal you're made of.
I'm out of words after minus 60 is something that unbelievable to really even imagine about that. A solo trip to certain temperature minus 60, all frozen out there, to one of the deadliest and one of the most strangest roads in the world. My question is why?
Like I said, it was personal. What else can I do? I've done Delhi, London. What next? How could I challenge? I think it very early on in my life, even as a child, like I said, my choice with the outdoors. The quest has always been to see what more lies within you, what more can you do. So with each journey, I think that's what eggs me on, in terms of what more can I endure and how will I react to XYZ situations, and then to be able to look at yourself like that. So it's always been a journey of self growth, self exploration. Of course, the canvas has been the outdoors and driving and expeditioning.
And there might have been cases in which you might have lost connection, network,
Oh,
guidance,
yes.
where to head
Oh, yes.
towards.
There were days when I would just cry because, it's one thing to be solo and quiet, but it's another thing to be in an extremely difficult situation and be alone. Through that journey of 28 days, I met nobody who spoke English. All the communication was restricted to Google Translate. And just something as simple as what you would take for granted otherwise, and just having a conversation becomes a privilege. And I think it just teaches you that life is so, that as human beings, you take so much for granted.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I want to have an idea that how do you prepare yourself, especially on the mental front? Initially, how do you are able to plan these things in your mind and then setting out yourself on the entire trip and then completing those trip? So I want to know, all the mental practices or mental muscle exercise that you do, that how you keeping you so strong over those years.
I think it become a part of me. It's become muscle memory now. I mean, how one it becomes a part of your DNA, to be honest. It's about not, I mean, I know it's very cliche and it beaten death when people say never give up and you have to be perseverant, patient, all these attributes that keep getting thrown so loosely all over the place. I think what has, when you're faced with death, when you're faced with uncertainty, when you're faced with adversity, these attributes assume a very different proportion. Because let's say the same attributes against an exam or a job or a relationship, you see, you're not seeing death. So the lesson learned, the lesson to be ingrained, when it comes from a point of survival, is far greater. So with each experience, you start becoming that person. And then when you're faced with the next experience, you look back on the previous one. And I do that a lot with myself. I talk to myself and I say, remember, when was the last time you felt like this? Oh, remember that day when this happened? And how did you react? Did you think of giving up? Of course you did. But was it worth it going through? Of course it was. So I think a lot of self talk helps, and always pitching yourself against these milestones, provided you have marked them as milestones for yourself,
Hmm.
provided you've appreciated what it's taken to get past that and made that mental note. So I think these mental milestones really, really help me because I keep going back to them. I remember in Siberia on the last day to Magadan, I don't think I faced a more challenging day, and that's my last milestone now, in fact. I was very ready to give up very early on in the day, and it was snowing and extremely difficult, and you're concentrating and you're driving and driving and driving, and you still have 300-400 kilometers to go, and it's already 4-5 in the evening. It's not letting up on the snow, the wheels are really struggling. And I said, this is it. And I was driving since 7 in the morning, so already 12 hours on the road. I said, this is it, and I can't do this any further. And there was a period of self-pity and admonishment where you said, why did you have to do this, and this is crazy and whatnot, and why the hell are you putting me through this and whatnot. And then I cried and cried and cried, and then I thought of my children, and then I thought, what if I don't get to see them ever again, and is this going to be the end? And doing all of that, I had managed less than 50 kilometers. I still had 300 plus. So I think at such points, then you start thinking about, I actually did that on that day. When was the last time you were like this? And you start
Hmm.
picking up from your own life situations where you've survived. And you start telling yourself, what stops you now? This is just another situation. And I think once the emotion is out, then come kicks in the pragmatics of survival. So
Ma'am, just to give you an idea, my trip was not as much, out of endeavor that yours was. So it was, I guess, way back in 2017. I planned a solo. I was studying as a foreign student in France. I went for a 3 or 4 days trip from France to Belgium. It's somewhere around 300 or 400 kilometers. It was actually summer vacations being going on, and
Mhm.
the chances of my summer vacation coinciding with my friends' vacation were negligible because they have different courses. Mine was different. So I was all about to, just Netflix and chill in my room for next 7 or 10 days. But then a friend of mine, he came in and he told me, why are you wasting your time? This is the most important time that you're getting as a solo one. So just go out and explore it. So I said, where should I go? He said, just go for a different country. Manika, what are you saying? I can't even go for a, how can I go for another country? There's so much of fear, fear of, being abducted, being assaulted, being molested, and all those kind of things. All those fears are popping up in my mind. So he said, you know what? Just plan it, book all the tickets. If you want to go for a bus, go for it. Plan it, research it well, and just go it. So I planned. Then I decided to go for a 3 day trip on my own. So I went there. I explored it. I initially marked around 14 or 15 places to visit by foot, and I ended up visiting 59 places that
Love,
were on and off my checklist.
love.
And the moment I came back, I realized, what, जो मैं 3 दिन पहले गया था, it was way different than the one who just came back,
You
and the perspective has changed a lot.
There's a very famous quote to this effect. Once the mind is stretched, you can't put it back into its original form.
Hmm.
But that's the beauty. of experience, because it adds so much to you that you're not your old self anymore.
Right. And ma'am, I guess just because of all these expeditions and all, now you decided, you know what, I'll be teaching others on this. I'll be carrying people along with myself to set out on an expedition, a group and a bunch of people. So was that the actual foundation that led you to form WBB?
Post Siberia, I got divorced. I was figuring out what to do with this line of work. Luckily, by then, and subsequently, I met Sati, Colonel Malik. So we were friends, and he decided to quit the army too. And we said, if the medium is something we so both of us really strongly believe in, and if it's impacted us as individuals so much, then why not spread this to a smaller group? But the apprehension was that you might not have too many takers for something like this. Who
Hmm.
would want to put themselves through rigor just to, and how many people are really on these kind of reflective journeys in life? It took us a while to put structure to WBB. Sati and I, of course, are partners in both life and business now, and we lead all expeditions together. And the idea is to undertake tough, mostly first of its kind, on lesser known routes in remote parts of the world, self drive 4x4 based expeditions in order to just, I guess, build your lens for life and
Hmm.
benefit from the medium.
Just like Wonders Beyond Boundaries that your company is. So there are few people, few companies that offer such sort of adventure expeditions for people. I know that people are looking out for such an expedition, but again, we don't have the way to find out how we can do it.
WBB is not a driving expedition company. Neither do we organize road trips, nor are we travel and tour operators. So, on WBB expeditions, we function collaboratively as a team. Whether we succeed or not is basis everyone's contribution to it. It's not like I'm leading it and therefore it's my responsibility to see that your tea is on
Hmm.
time and your room is booked. That doesn't work like that. So we function in a very self reliant expeditionary mode, which sets us apart. We're also pioneers in introducing extreme overlanding, which is, again, like I said, these are not entertainment, these are not holidays, they are not war packages, they are not just fun. Fun happens as a byproduct, but it's not the focus. So it's a lot of work that happens on these expeditions. I think the tone and tenor is what sets WBB apart, and from the word go. So people who come with us are those who want to engage, who want to test themselves, who want to, undertake a journey that's going to show them in bare bone and spirit to themselves and obviously to people around. It takes a lot of courage and a certain personality to want to do it.
Hmm.
Thankfully, most of the WB participants are now like family, and we've become this really small, close knit community of people who are mostly in the age group, I must say, is about 40 to 55, 75.
Okay.
People who achieved what they want to, or people who are doing very well professionally, whatnot, but who want to do something more, who want that sense of challenge and who want to test themselves. For a WBB expedition, the only way you'll get to know about it is perhaps word of mouth. That's the only way you'll be convinced to come on this
Hmm.
expedition. Because I will not be able to communicate this intangible through any ad, through any campaign, through any of that. And secondly,
Right.
you can't really market it because it's not a product, it's grueling. So you're going to be paying for something where you're going to come and work
Hmm.
your ass off and then, of course, enjoy what comes along.
And there's one more initiative that you have undertaken in this, which I personally like. I think it's our E4E, the
Yes.
Empowerment for Education. Like,
Yeah. Expeditions for education. Siberia was the first. The Pole of Cold 16 was the first, wherein I tied up with. So, because I have the luxury and I end up reaching corners of the world where most people don't go, I felt that given technology today, and like I said, it all stems from the central thought that experience and first hand experience is where the learning is. So I said, if children, for example, an average school kid in India doesn't, I think knows Siberia as a country, I mean, as a region exists. That's it.
Hmm.
Beyond that, it's only if he or she wants to learn about the place will he have to make that extra effort. But the curriculum doesn't really demand it. But I feel that's where education is. That's what life is, to be able to, gather from these different experiences. So I had 18 schools from the country follow me virtually, and I would Skype with them while on the journey. Basically, to A, show them a land that they knew very little about, B, to also make them see up close what it takes to do something that's first of its kind. It's not all rosy. And to observe closely the journey of an adventurer. It's always, I've noticed more of late than more in the last 10, 15 years, I would say, people have started romancing this idea of doing something different, of doing, something that your heart is calling for,
Hmm.
and all of that. The romance is great, but there's much more that comes with it. And it's a lot of back-breaking work. It's a lot of disappointed appointment. It's a lot of grueling stuff. It's a lot of give and take. It's a lot of consequence. And I think if you don't appreciate that, you live in dreamland, and that's it.
I feel that you're actually instilling the idea of adventure seeker, exile kind of thing in those young people, young student and young Nidhi. I would say that that might be seeing you back then, right on Skype or maybe in personal. That what, if she can do it, then we can also do it further future.
Absolutely. I want them to know that it's great to dream. A, it's okay to be unconventional. And if you dare to be unconventional and dream it, if you don't put in the hard work for it, it's never going to happen. And despite the hard work, if you can't endure
Hmm.
what it brings with it, you're never going to complete and achieve it. So I think it's hard work is great, but I think to persevere mentally beyond a point is what makes or breaks.
Perfectly agreed with you on this part. It's a make or break situation, definitely. And ma'am, apart from this, since you are a sort of influencer, not in that terms, but again, yes, a sort of motivator, a sort of influencer in this thing. So, is there any specific set of people that you seek inspiration from? Just getting ahead in life for a second step, for a next step. So, you seek inspiration from people, or maybe personalities in general.
I think from a lot of people, but more than people, I think I'm inspired by nature and the outdoors because I've grown up like that. So my inspiration is mostly the mountains and the water and the trees. And I think I connect with them at a far deeper level than with people,
Hmm.
to be honest. So my inspiration comes from that. And I think nature and the wilderness and the outdoors, it's one medium that you can't manipulate. It just gives you very, very basic feedback about yourself, which people don't necessarily do. It teaches you because it shows you for who you are and it appreciates you for who you are. It kind of gives you a rap, tells you who you are.
Ma'am, if not an adventure seeker, an adventure traveler that you say to yourself, so if not this, then what would you might have been in life apart from this? Have you ever thought of it? If not this.
I think I don't know, it would have to do something with nature and the outdoors. I can't really, that's been very central to my life. It would have to, maybe wildlife. I would have studied wildlife. That's an area that I really enjoy. And maybe wildlife biology. And yeah, maybe that's the closest I can get to. It had to be something with the wilderness.
Ma'am, I am totally impressed with you with all
Are
your journey. Definitely, you had your sort of fear, your sort of failures in your life, but out of all your experiences that you have had in your life, from your childhood to early life, and now to the current phase of WBB, so I really want to have an idea of top three life advices that you want to share to young people who are they're just being into their comfort zone and unable to push it out, unable to move outside to the discomfort zone. So actually, so what will be your top three life advices for them?
learning happens only out of comfort. Growth happens out of comfort. Even children, when they're born and they grow, they cry because their muscles stretch. If everything around you is going to be comfortable, your growth is going to be as stunted. So I think it's about putting yourself in situations or weathering situations that are uncomfortable is when you grow as a person. So I think that's the first. In order to do so, I think all of us are individuals. We all have our own calling, we have our own DNA, we have our own life situations, we have our own family background, the society we are brought up in, etc. I think more than running after what you want to be, the first part of life is about understanding who you are and where you're located and what your realities are. And I think that is an ongoing thing. It doesn't stop. That is something that people must focus on. Give some portion of their time and life to. Because the more you understand yourself, the more comfortable, the more navigable the whole landscape becomes. That's, I think, extremely important, self-awareness, and to be very aware, and to be that brutally honest. The third would be honesty, I think, not to anybody else but yourself. Just be
Hmm.
brutally honest. It's okay, you're not putting up an act, it's just you.
Yes, ma'am. It's just you, and it can't be beyond that. Definitely, ma'am. And if people would like to reach out to you, what is the best place or best media for you to connect with them?
WBB is on Instagram, it's WBBXOL, and the page on Facebook is WBB. I'm personally also on Facebook, Nidhi Salgame, and on Instagram is Nidhi WBB is the handle. So feel free to message in any of these.
Ma'am, with this we come to an end for this interview.
I just want to say, Maya, very sweet that you've made this effort, and I'm super happy to have connected with someone who's doing something so positive and growth oriented. So, congrats on your initiative.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I again want to say to you, your journey for 2015, it was special for you, but again, it was the most important part that I came across in life. With such a journey, it's not being done by men, it was done by three women out and out there. And one being the only solo driver. That's too much of hectic and too much of pressure, being listening to all those crankiness of things happening around you. But again, you have to focus yourself on the road because you are the one that are carrying them throughout all those 95 and 97 days. Highly impressed from you from then. And I was approaching you. I wasn't able to find the correct medium to approach an interview in this form. And finally, this podcast wala thing, it happened.
Glad we connected, Maya. Wishing you all the very best.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. All the best for your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the entire conversation till the end. If you like this episode, please take a screenshot of the same and tag me at MAYANKSEHRA and Nidhi ma'am at NIDHIWBB on Instagram and help us spread the word. We'll really appreciate you for this. Now, just step out of that comfort zone, follow your instinct, and seek the purpose you are destined to. I'll catch you in the next episode with another purpose seeker. Cheers.